Do you believe that just one word, a word you've known since elementary school, could open up the entire universe? No visa required, no tricks, just speak it the right way. And that word is thank you. But wait, don't walk away just yet, because this isn't a video telling you to be nice just to sound good. This is a journey into the very core of your spiritual power, a force you've been using the wrong way. Gratitude is not a virtue. It is a form of cosmic technology. And today, I'm going to show you how to use it like a real creator, not in a dry or boring way, but with depth, clarity, and a little sense of fun. Ready? Let's begin. Have you ever heard the story of the key you've always had but spent your whole life searching for? People often believe that to get what they want, they must go far. To find peace, they travel. To get rich, they chase the marketplace. To heal, they run after the best teachers. But the paradox is, the thing you need most is already within you, quietly waiting to be remembered. Something so simple it's almost laughable, yet powerful enough to shift your entire life from the inside out. And that thing is not willpower, not great knowledge, not some secret hidden in an ancient book. It is gratitude. Yes, you heard that right. Just gratitude. And I am not talking about the polite kind you say when you thank a cashier or nod to your morning coffee. I am talking about a kind of gratitude that is creative in nature, vibrating on its own frequency, like an invisible current running through your consciousness. It is not a reaction after receiving something, it is the cause that brings what you desire into form. And this is not theory, it is a truth I have lived, tested, and proven. I still remember the first time I realized this was not just a nice idea in a book, but a real force. I was at a very low point in my life. Everything was foggy. My emotions were numb. My bank account was empty. My faith was drained. I prayed, I meditated, I read all the right books, but it felt like God was busy on another planet. Then one morning, I heard a very soft whisper from within saying, "Stop asking and start thanking." I felt a bit crazy for listening to it. Thank what, I thought, when everything felt like a messy kitchen after a storm. But I tried. I sat down, closed my eyes, and instead of listing what I lacked, I thanked for the fact that I could still breathe, still think, still live one more day different from yesterday. I did not see miracles instantly, but something started to shift. First my mind, then my emotions. And eventually, reality began to follow. Slowly, but surely. That was when I realized gratitude is not a response. It is a posture, a hidden path that connects me to something much greater than myself. A frequency that, when tuned correctly, seems to align the entire universe back in my direction. The familiar line from the Bible that says, "Those who have will be given more, and those who do not will lose even what they think they have suddenly made perfect sense." This is not the injustice of God. This is the law of energy. Those who carry gratitude, meaning those who can perceive goodness even in its smallest seed, will see that goodness expand, because their mind becomes fertile ground where blessings can grow. But those who do not hold gratitude, no matter how much they are given, will not be able to keep it, because their heart is barren soil, unable to nurture anything. That is why some people, even with less, feel more joy, live more truth, and attract more fortune, while others, having everything, still feel empty, resentful, abandoned. The difference lies in the frequency of the mind, and gratitude is the switch that activates that signal. But do not get me wrong. I am not saying you need to fake positivity. I am not telling you to pretend you are happy while life is kicking you hard. I am simply saying that if you are brave enough to give thanks even when there is no clear reason, then in that very moment, you are unlocking a new dimension of reality for yourself. The kind of gratitude I am speaking of is not the result of something good happening. It is the seed, and when you plant that seed with full intention, you begin to create what you long for, not by force or pressure, but by allowing. Not by begging, but by cooperating with a hidden power that has always been alive inside you. I know this might sound too gentle to be real, but it is precisely that gentleness that holds the key. You have run enough, worried enough, pleaded enough. Now is the time to try something simple, yet profoundly powerful. Sit down, breathe deeply. Look at something you still have, whether it is a spoon, a leaf, or an unnamed sadness, and give thanks. Not because you have to, but because it is the only way to return to your true frequency. The frequency where you no longer need to control anything, because everything adjusts to your presence. I am not saying gratitude is some magic that turns everything pink and perfect, but I dare say it is the key that allows you to see the light even in rooms with no windows. And when you live in that light long enough, you no longer need miracles. You become the miracle. And it all begins with two simple words you learned back in kindergarten. Thank you. Only this time, say it with your whole soul. Stop asking for more and start being grateful for what you already have. It sounds cliché, but it may just be the secret of the universe. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract good things without effort, while others chase, beg, calculate, struggle step by step, and still feel empty and endlessly exhausted? You might say they are lucky. You might think it's fate. But what if I told you that the difference is not luck, but a subtle choice within, a nearly invisible choice? And what if I told you that gratitude, something so light, so irrational, so seemingly soft, is in fact the very cause of all breakthroughs? Would you dare to look again at how you're living each day? We grow up with the idea that we must achieve something before we are allowed to feel grateful. Like, when I get a better job, then I'll feel thankful. When I'm healthier, I'll finally open my heart to life. When people treat me better, I'll show them gratitude. But that's like telling a fireplace, I'll give you wood once you warm me up. Life doesn't work in reverse. Gratitude is not the reward for being given something. It is the invocation. It is an act of creation. It is a declaration to the universe that says, I already have, I already am, and I am already enough. And in that vibration, what once seemed missing begins to come closer, clearer, and faster. I once said during a talk, you cannot wait to see results before feeling grateful. Because when you only express gratitude after something arrives, you are using it as a passive acknowledgement, not a creative force. But if you give thanks beforehand, if you give thanks when nothing is certain, if you give thanks even when your life feels like chaos, then in that moment, you are acting as a true co-creator. You are living from the summit of consciousness, not from the bottom of desire. You are not waiting for a miracle. You are making one. And this, you don't have to believe me. Just try it. Start with the smallest, most ordinary things. In the morning, instead of grabbing your phone and flooding your mind with the noise of the world, pause. Notice the light through the curtain. Place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. Whisper thank you, not for something grand, but simply because you are still here, still breathing, still having a chance to choose again. Then observe. Observe how your body becomes lighter, how your mind softens, how the space inside you becomes warmer and wider. That is not illusion. That is reality responding to your inner shift in frequency. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. I know at times it might feel fake to thank something you haven't seen yet, as if you are lying to yourself. But the truth is, you are not lying. You are simply speaking from a different level of consciousness, the level from which all physical results originate. When you are grateful for what has not yet come as if it has already arrived, you are not fantasizing. You are forming an energetic pattern. And by the law of consciousness, the shape of your mind will be filled with the corresponding content. Just like someone setting the table for a guest who hasn't arrived, gratitude is the preparation of your soul for what you desire to become present. And that guest is life in its new form. You don't force it to come. You invite it through the most refined frequency of reception. Appreciation. No pushing. No pleading. Just an open heart, like a field opening to the sun. Not screaming for the light, simply receiving it in silence. The question is, do you have enough stillness inside you to truly hear the voice of gratitude rising from within? Do you have enough courage to act as if you've received, even when nothing outside has changed? Because real gratitude is always a decision made ahead of time, a way to step into the reality you choose, even when the world hasn't caught up. It is the highest form of faith, faith that needs no stamp, no signature, no validation from the world. And strangely, when you begin to live this way, the things you once chased begin to approach you, not by accident, not by someone else's favor, but because you changed the place from which you receive. You elevated yourself to become the person who matches what you once only dreamed of. I once met a woman who worked as an accountant. For years, she felt drained and miserable at her job. She said she prayed constantly, but nothing changed. Things even got worse. I asked her just one thing. Have you ever thanked that job, even once? She went silent, then said never. I said, try. Thank it as if it's a gift. Do it sincerely, even if you don't fully believe it yet. 1 month later, she came back with a completely different light in her eyes. Not only was she transferred to a more suitable position, but she also said she felt different, lighter, brighter. Nothing magical happened. She simply changed her vibration, and the universe did the rest. So I ask you, what in your life might be delayed, simply because you haven't dared to thank it in advance? What is waiting to enter? If only you would prepare your heart with gratitude instead of complaint. And if something comes to mind, are you willing to try without waiting for another reason, just to say thank you with no condition? Because maybe, just maybe, the moment you do, you'll touch the deepest space within yourself, where the voice inside not only speaks to you, but brings you back home. This is the power of voice within. Not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. Why is it that those who have seem to be given more, while those who do not lose even what they think they have? At first glance, this saying sounds unfair, even harsh. But if you've observed life long enough and deep enough, you'll come to realize this is not a punishment. It is a silent, precise, and impartial mechanism by which life operates. This isn't about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. It's about those who feel rich within being able to do more with less, while those who feel poor inside, even with abundance outside, continue to shrink and slowly lose what they already have. What is given more is not material, but space. Space for awareness to expand, space for flow to continue. And what is taken away is not an object, but the capacity to hold the flow within. Everything external is just a shell. What sustains and grows that shell is something more invisible, the inner state. A person with gratitude operates from fullness, lightness, and openness. They create a field of energy around them where things naturally grow. They don't live under the pressure of needing more to feel at peace. They live with a deep sense that what they have is already enough. And that state opens the door to more. When someone feels complete with what they already have, they create an environment that life wants to pour into. On the other hand, someone who constantly feels lacking always carries a depleted energy. They keep searching, but their seeking is a silent rejection of what they already have, and by natural law, what is not appreciated leaves. We often believe that failure comes from a lack of something external, not enough money, time, or support. But true failure begins when you lose gratitude. When you stop seeing what is present and only focus on what is missing, you turn your back on the one source that can carry you through anything. Gratitude does not change your circumstances instantly, but it changes you within those circumstances. And when you change, you gain the strength to redirect everything else. People often dream of a turning point, a big breakthrough, but real transformation starts quietly, starts small, like a soft breath in the middle of the night. And gratitude is that quiet sound that can stir the deepest layers of your being. I once met a man who wasn't wealthy, wasn't well known, and had nothing that would typically define success. But he lived in a rare energy, calm, clear, unhurried, unafraid. He told me that many years ago he lost everything. All he had left was a rented room and a tired body. But instead of bitterness, he chose something else. Every morning, he wrote down 3 things he was grateful for. Nothing grand. Sometimes just an unbroken chair, a bowl of leftover rice, or a song playing from next door. He did that for 3 months without missing a day. He didn't pray for anything. He just gave thanks. Then, something curious happened. A small job opportunity appeared. An old friend reached out. A project landed in front of him. Nothing huge, but enough to begin again. By the time I met him, his life was stable. Not rich by worldly standards, but rich in something more precious, the ownership of his life. He said gratitude was the one thing he could control when everything else was out of reach. And that was what brought everything back to him. I have never seen anyone live with true gratitude and lose their way. Gratitude anchors you amid chaos. It doesn't lull you to sleep. It doesn't ask you to stop dreaming. It simply keeps you from falling into the abyss of complaint, blame, and helplessness. Because once those take over, your entire inner system weakens. A weakened mind can't hold a clear vision. A closed heart can't receive goodness. And a discouraged soul stops creating altogether. Remember, abundance doesn't begin with having. It begins with feeling. When you feel you are enough, you act like someone who already has. And those who already have act with clarity. Without being pushed by fear, without being swept away by greed, and without needing to prove anything. People like that attract what fits them. Because they don't need to hold on tightly, they only need to choose rightly. And it is that right choosing, in the way they see, think, and speak, that creates their entire outcome. Gratitude is not one of those lofty skills you need to learn. It's already inside you. The only question is whether you activate it or not. Whether you let it speak or not. Because if you wait for life to be perfect before saying thank you, you'll be waiting a long time. But if you start giving thanks for the smallest things, you'll discover that gratitude itself begins to make everything appear more perfect in your eyes. And maybe that's the only true perfection, the perfection of a mind cleansed by grateful awareness. No judgment, no comparison. Just looking and realizing you already have more than you thought. And from here, the next thing can come. This is not a secret. It is a principle, like gravity, like sunrise after night, like warmth after cold. When you live in gratitude, you enter the living flow of life itself. You're no longer standing on the sidelines. You become part of it. No one can live for you, and no one can give thanks on your behalf. But once you begin, you will no longer need to ask for anything, because you will have found the true beginning. And from that place, every path becomes clearer, brighter, and closer. Not because the world changed, but because you entered it with a completely new lens. And that, alone, is enough. Stop complaining about your struggles, because every time you do, you're cutting yourself off from the very source of life. There is something strange about complaining that most people don't realize. It doesn't solve anything, yet it's incredibly effective at making everything feel heavier. Complaining doesn't extinguish the fire of difficulty. It pours fuel on it. The more you complain, the more your mind contracts, clarity fades, and goodness slips out of reach. Not because life is cruel, but because your energetic state in that moment is unable to contain the gifts that are trying to reach you. A person who lives in complaint is like an upside-down cup. Water is being poured constantly, but nothing is retained. Everything slides off. Nothing stays. But the person who lives in gratitude is different. They are like an open field, gently receiving, and because of that, life chooses to remain. Here's what's subtle. Gratitude is not just a psychological reaction. It's a spiritual choice. And that choice is decisive. Gratitude is not something you turn to only when everything is going well. True gratitude shows its power when life is full of challenges, and yet you still choose to say thank you. At that moment, you're not just surviving, you're actively inviting something new to unfold. Because complaining is easy. It's the well-worn path everyone knows. But gratitude requires awakening. It asks you to pause, to look again, and to choose to see differently. Not to deny what is hard, but to refuse to be swallowed by it. I remember a woman who once came to see me. Her eyes were tired. Her voice had grown used to blame. She talked about the pressure at work, the difficult colleagues, the little disappointments that had piled up over the years. I asked her, "Have you ever thanked your job, even once?" She laughed, as if I were speaking nonsense. I didn't insist. I simply invited her to try something. Each morning before starting her day, take 1 minute to thank her job as if it were something she chose with love. Thank it for giving her the chance to grow, to connect, to survive. No need to believe it right away. Just practice. 2 weeks later, she returned. She didn't say much, but something in her gaze had softened. No, the job hadn't changed. The colleagues were the same, but something else had shifted the way she received life. And that was enough to start new changes. Gratitude has a mysterious quality. It softens everything, not by hiding or sugarcoating reality, but by opening a new door in your mind. When you give thanks, you stop fighting what is. And that act of stopping creates space. Space to understand, to see again, to change direction. The one who complains is constantly clashing with reality. But the one who is grateful takes a step back, creates silence, and from there begins to choose, to act, to live differently. You may be in a situation you don't like, a job that doesn't fulfill you, relationships that fall short, a body that no longer feels the same. But if you take time each day to be grateful even for one tiny thing, you'll begin to notice the surface of life becoming clearer. Not because life has suddenly changed, but because you're no longer looking at it through the same lens. And that change in perception shifts everything inside you. When the inside shifts, the outside cannot remain the same. Gratitude needs no grand reason. It doesn't wait for miracles. It begins with the simplest of things. A deep breath, morning light, legs that still carry you, someone who listens to you, even in silence. When you are grateful for such things, you stop waiting for something big to feel complete. You begin to live as if completeness was always there, and the big things are simply bonuses for a state that was already full. There's a simple way to begin training your mind in gratitude. Each day, write down 10 things you are grateful for. Nothing fancy. The more specific, the better. The closer to your daily life, the more powerful. Write as if you're speaking to a dear friend you treasure. Write as if the things you write are the very fabric of your day. Then, when you're done, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and feel each one, not just with your memory, but with your heart. This is not a ritual. It is an act of reshaping your inner world. Every time you express gratitude, you're doing something invisible, yet deeply impactful. You're telling the universe, I recognize the good, no matter how small. And the universe, like a longtime friend, never ignores such an invitation. It responds by sending more pieces of good your way, not quickly, not loudly, but surely. If you ask whether gratitude really changes anything, I won't offer statistics. I will simply invite you to try, not with your logic, with your experience. By placing your hand on your heart each day and saying thank you, not for any specific reason, but simply because you still can. And from that space, you'll begin to feel the immeasurable start to spread. Your mind becomes clearer, your body lighter. Life, for no reason at all, starts to feel richer. That is not an illusion. That is how life moves when you stop resisting it. And gratitude is how you stop arguing and begin to align. From that point, every step feels lighter. Every decision becomes clearer. And even though challenges don't disappear, you are no longer afraid of them. You become the one who walks through difficulty without losing yourself, because you have learned to give thanks even when nothing is certain. And that is the first step to everything else beginning to appear. Gratitude is not the result, it is the cause. There's an interesting reversal in the way the universe works that very few people are willing to believe, even though it happens right in front of them every single day. We often think that once we have enough, we will feel grateful. Once we are healthy, we will thank our bodies. Once we succeed, we will appreciate the process. Once we are loved, we will finally understand the value of connection. But the truth flows in the opposite direction. You don't give thanks because you have. You have because you gave thanks. Gratitude is not an outcome. It is a beginning. It is not what you feel at the end of the road. It is the place you must stand in order to see the road appear. And if you do not enter into the state of gratitude first, the door will not open, no matter how many times you knock with logic, effort, or desperate prayers. I remember a friend once told me sincerely, "How can I be grateful for something I haven't seen? How can I give thanks when I'm in pain, when I'm unemployed, when I feel invisible in other people's lives?" I didn't argue. I just smiled and asked, "Have you ever tried being thankful right in the middle of that pain? Not to deny it, but to anchor yourself somewhere else within, a place from which you are no longer just enduring, but choosing again how you want to relate to your experience." Gratitude doesn't ask you to be happy. It asks you to be open. And that opening is the first signal that something new is ready to enter. The human mind is programmed to seek a sequence. First comes a reason, then comes a feeling. But the deepest lesson gratitude teaches us is that you don't need a reason to open your heart. It is the act of opening that calls the reason into existence. When you thank something that hasn't happened as if it already has, you are living from a higher level of awareness. That level is not ruled by outer circumstances, but guided by inner alignment. You are not pretending. You are placing yourself exactly where the thing you desire needs you to be. Not to plead, but to partner. We've been trained to react, to wait for results, then respond. To wait for love, then soften. To wait for recognition, then be our true selves. But the universe doesn't react. It reflects. It gives you what you are radiating, not what you are waiting for. So, if you are living from a state of scarcity, even while speaking words of hope, the signal you are sending out is still one of lack, and what you receive in return will match that. But if you live from a state of appreciation for what you already have, no matter how small, you are sending out the frequency of fullness, and fullness keeps finding its way back to you, not by chance, but because you have become compatible. Giving thanks before you have something is not blind faith. It is the expression of a trust that has matured. Like a farmer who plants seeds without needing to see fruit immediately to believe the tree will grow. They water it, tend to it, wait patiently, with a quiet confidence that life will take care of the rest. Gratitude is the water, the sunlight, the soil for the mental seeds you've planted. If you don't give thanks, those seeds wither. If you wait to express gratitude only after the fruit appears, you miss the most important stage of nurturing. Some of the things you've been waiting for may have been standing just outside your door for a long time. They haven't entered not because you are unworthy, but because you haven't lived as if you're ready to receive them. And gratitude is the signal that says, I am ready. Not with words, but with the subtlest shift in vibration. That shift doesn't make noise. It doesn't boast, but it is powerful enough to change everything around you in ways you never expected. A door opens, an opportunity arrives, a person shows up, no explanations needed. Just the awareness that you've entered a new state of being. I once witnessed a middle-aged man, burdened by illness, his mind clouded, his faith nearly gone. But he had one thing. Each morning, he would sit up, place his hand over his heart, and say, "Thank you. Thank you for still being alive. Thank you for being able to breathe. Thank you for the fact that, even in pain, he could see the light streaming through the window." People call that hope. But in truth, it is the act of consciously stepping out of negativity through one simple but powerful habit. And over time, without anyone noticing when it began, he became stronger. His skin regained color. His walk became lighter. It wasn't a miracle. It was healing from within, initiated by gratitude. If you are still waiting for a clear reason to feel grateful, you may be waiting for a long time. But if you start with something small, very small, and allow that gratitude to grow like a fire kindled by humble pieces of wood, you will notice yourself changing. And when you change, everything starts to change. Not with the speed of a storm, but with the steady flow of a river returning to its rightful course. So, if there is something you are still waiting for, try this pause and give thanks as if it is already here. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just be sincere. Thank it with emotion, not just with words. And then live your day. Don't chase the outcome. Just hold the state. Because once you begin giving thanks for no reason, simply because you have learned how to live in gratitude, then that state itself becomes the greatest reward you could ever receive. And any other reward that follows is just the reflection of who you've chosen to become. Do not read this if you are only seeking fiery motivation. There are moments when we think we need something external to feel complete, but the truth is, the moment we change something inside, everything else begins to realign. Not because the world hears us, but because we finally hear ourselves. When someone truly listens within and lives in gratitude, they no longer radiate lack. They emit a frequency of peace that life around them naturally begins to respond to. This isn't mystical. It is a real phenomenon you can feel in your heart if you're willing to observe with depth and honesty. I once sat beside a single mother in a small cafe tucked at the end of a quiet street, where only 2 cups of tea and an old yellow light lit the space. She shared about the years she raised her child alone, without help, without encouragement. I asked if she ever felt resentful. She shook her head and smiled, not with pride or bitterness, but with a quiet expression of someone who had lived long enough to discover something deeper than words. She said that when she sat down and, instead of asking why me, she chose to thank life for the strength to care for another soul, things began to soften, not disappear, just soften. And from there, she had the strength to continue. That was where a different way of living was born. Not fighting against what is, but harmonizing with it and gently transforming it from within. And that, I believe, is the kind of energy that cannot be replaced. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. Not the noise outside, but the quiet within, where you close your eyes and finally find the answers without needing to ask anyone anymore. Gratitude, when nurtured consistently, becomes a lasting source of strength. It is like a small oil lamp. If you refill it each day, the flame never goes out, and that light shines into corners the intellect cannot reach. It doesn't ask you to be clever. It doesn't require you to be strong. It only asks for sincerity, because sincerity is the key that opens every closed door. A sincere person doesn't need a script to say thank you. They just need to pause long enough to notice the goodness still present in what appears limited. There is a simple practice I have offered to those who come to me when they feel lost. Every time you find yourself drowning in negativity, blame, or frustration, pause. Write down 3 things you can be grateful for in that moment. It could be a glass of water, a chair to sit on, or a chance to begin again. Nothing is too small. As you begin to write, you will feel your energy shift. Not fast, but enough to pull you out of the wave of negativity rising inside you. From there, you stop reacting. You start choosing. And once you return to the place of the chooser, you are no longer a victim of circumstance. That is what gratitude does. It doesn't make you win immediately, but it doesn't let you lose. It keeps you awake when everything else may be falling apart. It's like an invisible shelter. It doesn't stop the rain, but it keeps you from being soaked to the bone. The one who lives in gratitude is not someone who feels no pain, but someone who refuses to let pain define them. They do not deny reality, but they do not let it be the final limit. And because of that, they carry something rare: mental endurance, a kind of strength that cannot be bought, borrowed, or handed down, but built over time through wholehearted living and honest thankfulness. I want you to imagine your day beginning, not with checking your phone, not with remembering your to-do list, but with a simple question: what am I grateful for today? That question won't change your schedule, but it changes your starting point. You won't step into the day with a mindset of lack. You'll enter it with fullness in your heart. And when your inner posture changes, your perception changes too. A kinder person, a less frustrating road, a rain shower that no longer bothers you. Not because the world changed, but because you are finally ready to receive life as it is, instead of demanding it to be what you want. Gratitude is a deeply personal act. It needs no witnesses, but it produces very public effects. Grateful people are often more loved, easier to work with, and seemingly luckier. Not because they only experience good things, but because they know how to see the good within all things. They are neither naive nor delusional. They live as if everything carries value, a chance to grow, and that belief helps them move through seasons others may get stuck in. Gratitude is not a destination. It is a state you can return to at any moment. Whenever you feel lost, find that voice again inside, gently, no shouting, because the strongest things are never loud. Just stop, breathe slowly, and remember, you always have a place to return to within yourself. And there, you will see more clearly than ever that all good things don't come from outside. They begin with a subtle change within, from the gratitude you choose each day, from the silent voice you've learned to listen to in peace. Divine power begins with 2 simple words: thank you. We often think gratitude is an emotion reserved for sunny days, when everything flows smoothly and our hearts are filled with joy. But it is in the difficult days, in the moments when there seems to be nothing left to hold on to, that gratitude reveals its true strength. In those moments, it stops being an emotion and becomes a choice. It is no longer a reaction to what we receive, but a foundation we stand on. And when you can give thanks in the very moments when most people would choose to complain, you step into a different layer of life where you are no longer tossed around by circumstances, but begin to consciously shape the way you exist within them. One day, I was walking through an old neighborhood where time seemed to slow down among faded walls and street vendors who had been there for years. An elderly woman, small and hunched, sat quietly beside a bunch of green bananas. The wind blew hard. Light rain fell. But she kept smiling. No one was buying. I stopped and bought a few. She thanked me in a voice as soft as a whisper. I asked her, "Do you ever feel sad sitting here alone every day?" She replied, "As long as I can still sit here, still see people passing by, still hear the sound of traffic, still feel that I'm alive, that's enough reason to be thankful." I stood there in silence. In the gentle rain and her simple words, I realized something. There are people who may never be rich by society's standards, yet their inner world shines like a secret spring. No one sees it, but it nourishes them every day. Gratitude is that warm, glowing light that quietly burns inside them. The truth is, no circumstance can take away your gratitude unless you choose to let it go. Gratitude does not come from the world outside. It comes from the state you decide to live in. If you lose it, it's not because the world was too harsh, but because you let the world define you instead of you defining the world. Those who live in gratitude are not naive or passive. They are clear-eyed. They see reality for what it is, but they choose to respond differently. They don't let their minds be hijacked by what's missing, but instead expand what's already present. And that choice, though small, makes all the difference. When you give thanks to someone, even though they are not perfect, you give that relationship a chance to heal. When you give thanks for a situation that didn't go your way, you open the path for insight and transformation. When you thank yourself despite your flaws, you lay the foundation for a healthy self-concept, one that evolves not through judgment but through compassion. Many people tell me they can't be grateful until they see results. But that's precisely why the results never come. The paradox is, the universe responds to frequency, not intention. If you live in doubt, even if your words sound positive, what returns to you will still reflect that inner hesitation. On the other hand, if you live as if what you hope for has already been planted and is now growing, if you are grateful for it in advance, you become a natural magnet for everything in alignment with that belief. Not because you demanded it, but because you became it. This is not a mental game. This is transformation. And transformation does not begin with what you do, but with the state you choose to dwell in. Gratitude doesn't ask you to do more. It simply asks you to pause long enough to notice. Notice what is already here. Notice the light shining through the cracks you once saw as wounds. Notice your hands still strong enough to hold on. Notice a new day beginning, even if you once thought you wouldn't survive the last one. And once you see, you no longer need anyone to remind you to be grateful. Your heart will naturally overflow with a quiet, lucid feeling. A feeling without a name, yet powerful enough to soften every distance and reconnect you with what is most sacred, life itself. Not in form, but in spirit. Not in calculation, but in presence. And gratitude is the purest language you can speak with life each day. If today you feel tired, lost, or unsure of everything, don't try to fix it all at once. Just sit still, place your hand over your heart, and whisper something simple. Thank you. Thank you for still being here. Thank you for having something to move toward. Thank you for learning, even amid the chaos, how to come back to yourself. And maybe nothing will appear to change immediately. But I promise you, something is already blooming in the quiet. A new seed has just been planted in your mind. And if you water it with daily gratitude, it will grow quietly but surely into a version of you that even you will be amazed to meet when you look back someday. You don't need to see it to believe it. Believe first, and then you will see. There's something very few people are willing to admit, that gratitude doesn't come naturally when you're in a state of confusion, tension, or anger. It's not like a survival instinct. It's not a fleeting emotion that arises on its own. Gratitude is a conscious choice, an intentional decision you must make, especially when your mind wants to move in the opposite direction. And that is where your true power begins. Because you are no longer just reacting to life, you are now navigating your inner world with intention. I once went through a long period where every morning I woke up with a heavy feeling I couldn't name. There was no clear reason, no specific tragedy, just a quiet fatigue, a dullness that filled every breath. On days like that, the idea of saying thank you felt hollow. But instead of rejecting it, I did the opposite. Not to pretend, just to observe what would happen if I chose to shift my internal state first, regardless of how I felt. And the strange thing was, every time I whispered thank you, even though nothing changed on the outside, a new space opened inside. as if I had flipped a switch, lighting a small flame, just enough to see things from a new angle. Not bright, but warm. Not a solution, but a softening of the struggle. At its deepest level, gratitude is not a reaction to what is pleasant. It is clarity in the middle of chaos. It is the moment you say, I still have the power to choose how I experience this, and I choose to begin from a place of light. When you stand in a place of light, even if it's just a flicker, the entire landscape around you begins to look different. That doesn't mean you deny your pain. On the contrary, you embrace it. But you don't let it be the only lens through which you see. You hold on to something else, and that something is gratitude. Someone once asked me, what if I have nothing to be grateful for? I replied, if you're aware enough to ask that question, then you still have awareness. And with awareness, you can choose to see again. You can begin with the smallest thing, a breath, a ray of sunlight through the window, a friend who's thinking of you, even if you haven't spoken. Gratitude doesn't require perfection. It only asks you to return to this moment and ask, what is still present here that I've overlooked? The answer doesn't need to be profound. It just needs to be real. And when you truly see it, gratitude arises naturally. You don't have to force it. There's a beautiful paradox. The moment you feel most empty is often the moment you're closest to feeling full. Because all the noise is gone. No more expectations. No more pressure to prove anything. And in that silence, you begin to hear life's most subtle rhythms. Your heartbeat, the wind at your window, the smell of coffee from the next room, all the things you would normally ignore. And within those tiny details, life is whispering something very sincere, that you are still here, that nothing is over yet, and that if you open your heart just a little more, you'll feel nourished in ways nothing else could provide. We don't practice gratitude to earn a reward. We practice it to return to ourselves, return to the present moment, return to the rhythm of life that is always simple but full of wonder. And only when you learn to live from that state does everything else begin to shift gently, naturally, without force. Gratitude makes you soft without being weak, strong without having to struggle. It gives you a certain inner weight that keeps you steady amidst small storms. You begin to live like someone who has found where they belong, even while walking through unfamiliar territory. I believe none of us need to go searching for gratitude. It has always been there, simply hidden beneath layers of thought, expectation, and comparison. Once you begin peeling back those layers, what remains is a quiet, deep, and honest state of being. It doesn't come from success. It doesn't depend on achievement. It arises from a deep acceptance of life as it is, and a willingness to love all that is present, even the incomplete parts. And perhaps along this long journey, the most beautiful thing is not what you achieve, but how you choose to live through the highs and lows with gratitude. Not as a habit you were taught, but as a language you remembered. And when you live in that language, you no longer need to go far to find peace, because you carry it within you every day in the most ordinary moments that quietly shine with light only a still heart can feel. You can't fake gratitude and expect the universe to respond, because you can't fake it with yourself. Have you ever realized that most of what troubles you doesn't actually come from the event itself, but from how you respond to it? A single comment can upset you all day, not because the words are powerful, but because you allowed them to define your emotions. A small failure can make you give up on a long journey, not because it was truly serious, but because you identified yourself with that moment. In times like these, if you pause and take a step back, you will notice a small door open a place where you can choose a different response. And that door is gratitude. It does not erase pain. It does not deny reality, but it shifts the position from which you see the problem. From that new perspective, everything begins to look lighter and more illuminated. I once spoke with a young man who was feeling discouraged about his career. He told me he had tried so hard, but everything felt stuck. When I asked him what he had recently given thanks for, he hesitated and admitted he couldn't think of anything. I told him, then start by thanking the very stagnation itself, because at the very least, it gives you a chance to pause, to reassess your direction, rather than running forward without knowing where you're going. He smiled gently, said nothing more. A week later, he messaged me to say he had started writing down 3 things he was grateful for each day. And while nothing big had changed yet, he felt more grounded, less overwhelmed by the spiral of hopelessness. That's not a miracle. That's what naturally happens when you stop resisting and return to the present moment with sincere gratitude. Someone who lives with gratitude is not someone who is always pleased with life, but they do not let their dissatisfaction turn into bitterness. They know how to stay light, even when life feels heavy. They don't let circumstances determine the quality of their spirit. And for that, they carry a unique kind of strength, quiet, unassuming, but deeply felt by those around them. Have you ever met someone like that? Someone who, despite difficulty, always radiates peace. Someone whose presence softens a room. That is not luck. That is the result of an inner journey where gratitude becomes the most faithful teacher. Many people believe they can only feel grateful once they have more. But in truth, it's when you are grateful for what you already have, no matter how small, that the door opens to receive more. Because the universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to the energy you carry. If you keep sending out the frequency of lack, you will be met with experiences that confirm that lack. But if you live in the vibration of gratitude and sufficiency, life will align with you like a stream finding its natural course. No force, no demand. Things will come as a natural response. Some people spend their whole lives seeking validation from the outside, forgetting that true validation must begin within. Gratitude is how you return to your authentic presence. It pulls you out of the trap of comparison, where you always feel something is missing. But if you pause and give thanks for who and what you already are, you'll begin to see that nothing has truly been missing. You just never gave yourself the chance to see what was already here. When you look deeper, everything reveals meaning, even the things that once hurt you. And from there, healing begins. I don't encourage you to deny your struggles. In fact, I ask you to look directly at them, but from a different state of being. From the state of someone who doesn't just see pain, but sees the lesson embedded within it. From the state of someone who is not just enduring, but learning to thank life for every inch of growth. And when you live like that, you stop being a victim. You become a creator, not through force, but through the spiritual strength born of deep and consistent gratitude. There is something remarkable about grateful people. They tend to receive more help, not because they ask, but because their energy makes others want to help. They don't make you feel used. They don't complain or demand. They simply show up, appreciate, and offer kindness. And that creates a quiet ripple effect. In a world that rushes past everything, a person who knows how to pause and give thanks becomes a rare point of connection, not because they need you, but because they remind you of something you once knew but may have forgotten. That life doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to be honored. Gratitude, in the end, is not a technique you learn. It is a nature you awaken, a nature that has always been within you, buried beneath unmet expectations, unresolved disappointments, and misunderstood pain. When you are willing to return, to sit still and listen, you will hear that voice of gratitude again, soft as breath, steady as your heartbeat. And when you begin to live from that voice, every small choice you make carries a quiet clarity. Every action becomes more meaningful, and every moment becomes part of a deeper awareness. You don't need to change the world. You just need to change how you walk through it, with a heart that remembers to be grateful. And when you do, everything you touch will begin to feel alive. And you will not merely exist, you will begin to live with true meaning. Unifying words and emotion, this is how you rewrite destiny. There are days when you wake up and your soul feels like an empty room. The things that once excited you now seem distant. The people who used to warm your heart no longer spark the same connection. The world keeps turning, but you are still, quietly standing, without knowing why. And in that seemingly meaningless moment, you are standing before a profound opportunity, a doorway so subtle that most people miss it, because it doesn't glow brightly or call your name. It is the invitation to return to your inner voice, to remember the essential truths that once held you up but have been forgotten amid the noise of busy living. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. It is not the whisper of comfort, but the voice of your deepest self, where there is no rush, no judgment, only truth. And truth is never loud. It is still, but luminous. And as long as you remain connected to that inner space, you will never be truly lost, no matter how chaotic the outside world becomes. Gratitude is not something you remember only when life is good. It is the glue that holds you to that deeper voice. Because when you are grateful, you stop chasing outward and begin to look inward. You realize that even in this moment, whether filled with lack or heartbreak, there is still something left to hold on to, something to help you keep walking. It may be so small that no one else sees it, but if you see it, it can change the entire way you move through your day. I once spent an afternoon in a park for no special reason. I simply felt empty and needed quiet. A child nearby was playing in the dirt. No toys, no screens, just a stone and a piece of wood. Yet their face glowed as if the whole world fit in the palm of their hand. I watched for a long while, then smiled, because I understood the glow didn't come from circumstances. It came from presence, a soul fully alive, needing nothing more. And when I stood up to leave that bench, I carried with me something that seemed small but was truly vast. The realization that I can feel alive simply by witnessing life in another. That's what gratitude does. It reopens the eyes you had closed out of weariness. It reawakens the warmth you thought you had lost, chasing bigger dreams. And then you realize the real dream isn't ahead of you. It begins here, in seeing beauty in what already is. A dream that doesn't require new conditions to exist, but needs inner light to grow. And that light is sustained each day by unconditional gratitude. When you feel you have nothing left to hold on to, try holding this one thought. Maybe things aren't going your way, but they are moving according to something greater that you're not yet still enough to see. And gratitude is the bridge to that stillness. You don't need to understand everything. But if you have the courage to say thank you before the outcome arrives, you are telling life that you trust. And that trust is not something you learn from books. It is something you live moment by moment with the truest feeling you have inside. I know people who have lost everything, and from the heart of that loss, they discovered something more important. Not wealth, not status, but a kind of freedom they never had before. Freedom from illusion. Freedom from fear of loss. And they began to live again, not for anything, but simply because they could feel life inside them. And from that moment on, everything they touched became more real, more alive, more resonant, because they were now living from a place of deep rootedness within. You can do this too. You don't have to wait for everything to collapse. You don't have to wait for some catastrophe to awaken you. You only have to pause, take a breath, and ask what within me is still alive, still glowing, no matter what's happening outside. Then thank that part, not out of duty, not for the sake of virtue, but because you genuinely see it. And when you see it, you'll know. And when you know, fear loses its grip. Because you've found where you belong. And from there, you can move forward quietly without needing anyone else to understand, because you now understand yourself. Gratitude doesn't teach you how to gain more. It teaches you how to live more deeply with what you already have. It doesn't pull you away from the present. It draws you closer to it, closer to truth, to clarity, to what is, so you no longer need to escape. And because of that, it is not just an attitude. It is a way of being, a presence, a form of wisdom, and a path back home, no matter how far you've wandered. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. And if you listen closely enough, you'll realize that voice is not merely whispering to you. It is guiding you, gently but firmly, step by step, toward the light. Don't say thank you just to sound polite. Say it as if you are offering a sacred gift to the universe. There is something mysterious about gratitude. The more you practice it, the more you realize it is not merely an emotional reaction, but a state of awareness. It does not depend on what just happened, nor on how favorable your situation is. It comes from a deep place within, where you no longer measure gains or losses, where you stop bargaining with life. Gratitude is like a quiet light in the mind, silently illuminating every experience you pass through. When you carry that light, you don't need to look far to find something beautiful. You begin to see it in what is already here, right now. And when you live like that, everything becomes more alive, more meaningful, and more sacred, even if nothing is new or extraordinary. I once met an elderly woman living alone in a small house at the end of a narrow alley. Her life was quiet, without accolades, without stories to impress. Yet in the way she spoke, poured tea, and smiled at visiting guests, there was something deeply grounded and effortlessly light. When I asked what kept her so at peace, she simply said, "I never forget to say thank you to the morning. Whether it's a sunny morning or a rainy one, whether I feel strong or sluggish, I always begin with a quiet whisper to life. I am still here, and that is enough for me to be grateful." I sat in silence for a long time after hearing that. Not because it was profound in words, but because it was profoundly real. And in a world full of chaos, that kind of quiet truth is perhaps the deepest wisdom a person can carry. We often get swept away by goals, ambitions, the endless chase for more, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve, to live fully, to give more. But problems begin when we forget that the present moment also deserves reverence. We forget that every step on the path is worth living deeply, not just the destination. Gratitude teaches you how to walk without losing yourself, how to move forward without discarding the treasures blooming quietly beneath your feet. You don't have to choose between progress and presence. You can hold both as long as you remain awake. And that kind of awareness comes from giving thanks not just for results, but for the journey itself. If you pay attention, you'll notice that gratitude gives everything more depth. A meal becomes more than just nourishment. A conversation becomes more than just an exchange of words. A day becomes more than a passing of hours. It becomes a canvas you paint with your way of being. And gratitude is the base color that brings all of it to life. When you live with it, no one needs to remind you to appreciate life. You feel it in every breath. Gratitude also holds a silent healing power few people recognize. When you are hurt, betrayed, or struggling to trust again, it is gratitude that helps you keep your heart open. It reminds you that although someone has let you down, someone else has always been there, kind and quietly supportive. Though you've endured pain, you've also lived moments that saved you. And perhaps most important of all, even if you've made mistakes or lost something dear, you still hold the ability to be grateful. And if you still have that, then you have not lost your most essential self. I once witnessed a father standing outside the emergency room, hands clasped in silent prayer. His daughter was critically injured, and no one could promise anything. But when I asked how he felt, he said, "I still give thanks, because at least I can be here waiting for her, instead of hearing bad news from afar." He didn't know what would happen, but he chose to hold on to one reason to give thanks, even if it was just the fragile presence of hope. And that, to me, was the highest form of inner courage. You see, gratitude doesn't need a reason to appear. It doesn't wait for a perfect day. It only waits for you to be awake enough to see, deep enough to feel, and sincere enough to admit that you are still here, still breathing, still given the chance to renew yourself. And if you begin from there, even if your day is not perfect, you can still live it fully, a day worth remembering, a day that needs nothing more for you to feel at peace. Gratitude is not just a feeling. It is a skill. And like any other skill, it must be practiced. You practice by pausing in the middle of your busy life and asking yourself what sacred thing you are overlooking. You practice by saying thank you not only to those who are kind to you, but to the situations that have taught you something meaningful. You practice by listening again to your inner voice every time you feel pulled away from the present, because that is when you most need to return not to a physical place, but to the stillness within you. A place where you are no longer defined by success or failure, but simply allowed to be. A place where everything you've lived becomes valuable because you lived it with presence. And that's why I've always believed that gratitude is not a reward for the fortunate, but the foundation of those who live deeply. Anyone can learn it as long as they're willing to stop, observe, and listen. Because while you may never know what tomorrow holds, if you can still hold on to gratitude, you will always know how to walk through whatever comes with dignity, with light, and with a groundedness that nothing outside of you can take away. A crazy day to be grateful for everything. Sometimes your life does not need a grand turning point. It only takes one small but sincere shift to shake off all the old layers you are still carrying. A new way of looking at something familiar. A quiet sentence that changes the direction of your thinking. A choice made not by habit, but with awareness. And you might be surprised that such tiny changes can open a path within you that never existed before. We often believe that transformation must come like a storm, a revolution, something dramatic and powerful. But no, sometimes change is simply choosing to say thank you to the very pain that has made you silent, choosing to stay quiet instead of reacting, choosing to forgive without needing a perfect reason. And in that moment, you step into a different version of yourself, one that is less loud, but more enduring and filled with quiet strength. I used to think I had to wait until everything was perfect to live fully, but then I realized life never waits for you. It happens right in the middle of your mess. It arrives while you are complaining, exhausted, or about to give up. And if you are attentive enough to catch its signal, then even in the chaos of a disordered day, you can still walk out with a quiet smile. Because you now understand you do not need to have everything to start over. All you need is gratitude and a sincere decision to live differently, from within. So let me ask you something, slowly and sincerely. If nothing around you changes, would you still dare to change yourself? Not because you are forced to, but because you deserve a deeper experience of life. Would you be willing to let go of your old ways of reacting? Would you dare to release the usual excuses? Would you walk away from laziness disguised as logic? Ask yourself that quietly. No one else needs to hear it, only you. But if you are truly ready, if your heart is pulsing with even the faintest new rhythm, then I want you to show it. Leave a message below. Just 3 words. I am ready. Or even a simple number 1. You do not need to explain. Just be present. And when you leave that mark, you are not only speaking to me, you are sending a signal to your subconscious that it is time to leave the comfort zone, to finally live the truth you've always known but never dared to act on. I know you are still listening. And I know it is not easy to stay until this point. That tells me you already have enough patience, enough curiosity, and enough desire. That is a beginning worth honoring. Not everyone does that, especially in a world that moves so fast, where feelings are easily skipped and people are constantly chasing an ideal version of themselves instead of embracing their still unfinished truth. But you stayed, you listened, you felt, and I do not take that for granted. I am grateful for you, truly grateful, because you created a space to listen to yourself, and you gave me the chance to walk beside you in this quiet inner journey. I am not here to tell you that change is easy. I am here to tell you that it is necessary. Because if you keep living inside your old self, with the same thoughts and the same reactions, you will keep getting the same results. And you deserve more than that. You deserve a life that is lighter, clearer, freer. And it does not begin with a loud decision, but with a silent commitment, a promise without performance, a small but consistent action. That action might be waking up 10 minutes earlier to breathe, saying thank you, even when the day disappoints you, forgiving yourself for what is still unfinished. And little by little, you begin to rebuild the inner home you live in. No rush. Just honesty. You might think you are just an ordinary person in a vast world. But let me tell you this. The world still needs someone like you. Someone willing to face their inner truth. Someone ready to live deeply and gratefully. Someone brave enough to change, not for approval, but for inner freedom. And each time you live that way, you are sending out a quiet echo, but a powerful one. A kind of influence that does not need shouting. It only needs presence. And this world is longing for people like you. So, if you are silently nodding, if your heart is feeling something that you do not yet know how to name, hold it. Nourish it. Protect it. And if you feel called to, leave a mark below. Just say, I am ready. Or the number 1. Let me know you are here. Let yourself know that you have already begun. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for walking this path up to this moment. And if you are truly ready, then we will continue. Not on the old path, but on the one you have just opened within yourself, where growth is no longer a dream, but a living truth waiting for your arrival. Gratitude is the official language of communication with God. When you begin to live with gratitude, you will discover something strange, almost mystical. The problems in your life may not disappear, but they start to lose their grip on you. Difficulties still exist. Challenges do not simply vanish, but you become too vast for them to consume. They can no longer swallow you into the dark. And then you realize a truth you never dared to believe before. It is not your circumstances that shape your mind. It is your mind that chooses how to walk through those circumstances. You could be sitting in the middle of a gray day, pouring rain outside, all your projects tangled in chaos, the news filled with negativity, and a loved one has just spoken to you harshly. But instead of collapsing, you take a deep breath, look out the window, and notice a branch swaying gently in the wind. In that moment, you realize something real is still here. Life, and you are part of it. Right then, it is not because you are strong-willed. It is because you are no longer a leaf being swept away. You have grown roots. You have learned how to stay still and give thanks. People often mistake gratitude for resignation. They think that if you are always grateful, you will lose the drive to move forward. But the truth is the opposite. Only when you are truly grateful can you grow. Because a person without gratitude is always in lack. And one who is constantly lacking only wants to take, not to create. But gratitude does not make you stop. It lets you begin from a place of fullness. From that place, you continue to build. You act. You create something better, not because you are missing anything, but because you have so much within you that you want to share it with the world. That is a higher level of maturity, where action is no longer driven by fear, but by love. I remember once walking through an old neighborhood and seeing an elderly man carefully fixing his rusted, paint-chipped bicycle in front of his house. It was the kind of bike no one really uses anymore. I asked him why he did not just throw it away. He looked at me, smiled gently, and said, "Because it carried me through my youth. Every time I touch it, I remember a part of my journey, not because I miss the past, but because I am grateful. Grateful that I once lived, that I once pedaled through hard days without giving up. The bike no longer runs, but the memory of effort is still there, and I am still here, still given a chance to be thankful." I said nothing more, just nodded and walked away, carrying that image like a quiet reminder. Not everything old should be discarded. Some things only reveal their true value when you look at them through the eyes of gratitude. We live in a time where everything must be fast, new, and shiny. And unintentionally, we get swept up in that pace, thinking happiness is something we must chase, that peace only comes after we have achieved everything. But sometimes, happiness is right there, in the moment you sit quietly, holding a warm cup of water, with a heart no longer comparing. In that moment, you do not need more. You only need what you already have, and that is enough. Gratitude helps you pause in the middle of the race, not to give up, but to remember why you started. It wakes you up from the illusion of success and brings you back to a gentler, deeper definition. Success is not having more, but feeling more with what you already have. You could live in a mansion and still feel empty. And you could live in a small, simple room and feel that your life is complete. The difference is not in possessions, but in the lens through which you see life. Gratitude is that lens. It clarifies the line between true desire and blind ambition. It helps you recognize when you are truly growing and when you are simply running from a deep, unspoken insecurity. Every time you step back and give thanks for something small, you are freeing yourself from the endless hunger modern society feeds. You return to your authentic self, where everything, without decoration, still shines in its own unique way. Someone once asked me, "How do you know if you are truly grateful or just comforting yourself?" The answer is simple. When you are truly grateful, you no longer feel the need to prove anything. You do not need to explain, to share, or to perform. You simply live in it like you live in breath, quietly, deeply, and that stillness is the sign. It does not come from logic. It comes from a kind of awareness that transcends calculation. When you no longer demand more from life, yet still act with full kindness, gratitude has become part of who you are. And one day, when you look back at the life you have lived, you will not regret what you did not achieve. You will feel grateful that the journey itself shaped you into who you are now. No matter how difficult, painful, or full of failure it was, you will see it was all worth it. Not because it was perfect, but because you lived it truthfully. And gratitude, quiet and unwavering, was always there, lifting you up one moment at a time until you learned to stand. Not because you never fell again, but because you learned to rise with dignity. And that is the beginning of a life no one can ever take away from you. Gratitude is the bridge between you and those you once resented. If you have ever sat in complete silence on an early morning, when the city is still asleep, when worries have yet to rush in, and only your own breath echoes like a personal soundtrack, then you will understand why there are moments that need no explanation, no reason, only presence and gratitude. Gratitude is not just a feeling, it is a state of being. And when you enter that state, everything that once seemed tangled becomes so simple that you wonder why you had not lived this way all along. But you also know it is not easy to reach that state when your mind is filled with noise, expectations, and the constant pressure to become someone you are not. That is when gratitude becomes a sacred silence, a space where you do not need to be anyone, only yourself, clear enough to notice what is truly happening, and deep enough to stay with it without judgment. I once asked a dear friend of mine, an artist I deeply respect. What helped him keep his inspiration alive through years of pressure, chaos, and even isolation? He simply said, "I do not wait for inspiration. I live in it. I look at the tree in my garden every morning and feel grateful it still stands. I drink a cup of coffee and feel grateful I have hands to hold it. I hear the wind through the window and feel grateful my ears still work." Inspiration comes from what does not need to be searched for, because I never lost the ability to see it. That statement awakened something in me. It made me realize that busyness does not steal our energy. It steals our awareness. We do not lose life. We just forget how to feel it. And gratitude is the bridge that brings us back. This is the power of voice within. Not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. It is not a sound outside you, but a calm place within, where no one can enter unless you allow them. It is where all questions are set down, all struggles cease, and all comparisons lose their weight. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to please anyone. You only need to be honest with what is alive inside you. And if you can hear that voice, you will realize there is no need to go anywhere to find peace. It has always been there, waiting for you to return. Each time you pause, each time you take a deep breath, and each time you remember that life owes you nothing, because it is you who owes life a quiet, sincere thank you. There was a time I believed only big things were worth being grateful for, but life, through its nameless lessons, taught me that gratitude is not about something good happening. It is about having lived long enough to understand what it meant. Maybe you do not have what you want, but if you have eyes to see, a heart to feel, a mind to learn, and the chance to grow, then you already have more than enough. That sense of enough is not a final destination. It is the ground from which you move forward. And only when you move from a place of gratitude do you avoid blind demands, the pressure to compete, and the endless spiral of desire. You walk as a free person, and that freedom makes you radiant in a way no one else can replicate. Someone once asked me how to know if they were truly living in gratitude. My answer was simple: if you feel light. Not light because everything is okay, but because you are no longer fighting what is. You see hardship and do not deny it. You accept pain without needing to explain it away. You look at the person who hurt you and no longer see yourself as a victim. In that moment, gratitude does not come from a moral lesson. It comes from a ripened awareness that everything happening is part of a journey to grow. And if you can recognize that, then that alone is already a profound gift. I never encourage anyone to ignore pain or pretend things are fine. True gratitude is not denial. It is looking directly into what is real, while still keeping a small light alive in your heart. A place where, even in the storm, you can light a small candle and whisper, "I am still okay." Not because everything is easy, but because you have stopped resisting what cannot be changed. That is when you are no longer a victim of life, but a person choosing how to live, and that choice is real freedom. The world may spin in speed, judgment, and endless information, but if you can sit still, breathe deeply, and give thanks, you have just stepped out of a loop that many remain trapped in for life. You did not escape through resistance, but through the wisdom of letting go. Letting go of the need to win, the habit of blaming, the urge to label every experience. And in that very moment, you are no longer who you used to be. You do not need to shout to prove anything. You only need to live and let your presence reveal the way. That is gratitude flowing through you, and that is something no one can ever take away. Do not just say thank you. Live as if gratitude itself is breathing through you. In the end, the most miraculous thing does not lie in the theories you have heard, not in the pages of books or the speeches you have watched, but in the moment you truly live with an open heart, a grateful spirit, and a mind willing to listen to itself again. When you realize that gratitude is not a nice gesture to check off your list, but a subtle living energy waiting to be activated from within, that is when life begins to respond to you differently. It is no longer the same challenging life you must brace yourself to endure, but a flowing current you can step into, dance with, and harmonize with without losing your essence. Gratitude stops you from demanding too much, yet allows you to receive more than you ever dared to imagine. It makes you quiet, but not passive, humble, but not small, gentle, but not shallow, grounded, but not rigid. That is what deep maturity feels like, needing no declaration, yet felt by everyone around you. And that is the mark of true inner power. If you have stayed with me this far, I do not believe you are just someone listening to a good story. I believe you are someone searching for something real, something that touches the deepest part of you, not to change the world out there, but to return and reorder the world within yourself. And if that feels true to you, then let me say thank you with all my heart, because your presence, your listening, is the reason I tell this story not as a lesson, but as a quiet whisper between two souls walking toward the light. Life may be imperfect in many ways, but if you can still hold a quiet corner in your soul, you can always begin again. And sometimes, beginning again is not about doing something grand. It is simply about sitting down, taking a deep breath, and saying thank you. Just that. And it is enough to shift the direction of your entire day, and gradually, your entire life. If you remember only one thing today, let it be this: gratitude does not need a reason to exist. It does not require conditions to arise. It only needs you to choose it among 1,000 other choices every single day. When you do that, you are walking a path that few dare to walk, but it is also the path that leads you to the deepest layers of life. Not because you will gain something extraordinary, but because you will realize that your very presence in this moment is already something extraordinary. And that alone is reason enough to live, without waiting for any other miracle. You are the miracle, breathing, walking, thinking, loving, experiencing. And every thank you offer, whether in silence or through action, becomes a trace of awareness. I am not here to make you into someone else. I am only here to remind you that you are already enough, that within you there is always a voice whispering, guiding you back to what is most real. That voice does not need to shout. It does not need to prove anything. It only needs your silence to be heard. And when you listen long enough, you will realize it is not the voice of a teacher. It is your voice, your clearest and most authentic self. This is the power of voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to, a space no one can ever take from you, because it has always been yours since the very beginning. And now, before we close this conversation, I want to leave you with something sincere. The path of mindful living is not for those seeking shortcuts. It is not for those who only want comfort. It is for those who dare to be honest, to feel pain, and to change. And if you have listened this far, I believe you are one of those people. So do not let life pass by in unconscious routine. Begin again. Not next Monday, not when everything is perfect, but right now, with one small act, one deep breath, one heartfelt thank you, one kind intention, one conscious step, because it is those small things, repeated with intention, that transform your entire life, not through magic, but through deliberate repetition. It is not the skilled who begin. It is the ones who begin who become skilled. I thank you for being here, for allowing me to share this with you. And I hope that someday, very soon, when life sweeps you away again, you will pause for a moment, listen again, and remember that you can always return. Return to the space within, where you do not have to try to be loved, where you do not need to be perfect to be worthy. You only need to be yourself, true enough, awake enough, and grateful enough. That is the starting point of every deep transformation. I will see you again in the next journeys, where we will continue to explore the deeper dimensions of wisdom, of healing, and of a life not just survived, but truly lived. Thank you for being here. And always remember, what you are looking for is not ahead of you. It is already within you.